The Reverend Miles Brandon of the Episcopal Student Center in Austin, Texas, notes that our culture is absolutely captivated with making lists. It all started in 1955 when Edgar Smith of Fortune magazine suggested they publish a list of the largest U.S. companies. Well, that became the birth of the Fortune 500. But the 40th richest people under 40, the 50 most powerful women in business, the 100 best companies to work for, the 25 most powerful lobbyists in Washington, and the best companies for minority employees are all other lists they have since developed. Brandon reminds us that even Christians appreciate a good list. Paul Wilkes, a Christian writer, published 2 books called Excellent Protestant Congregations. The other was called Excellent Catholic Parishes. On a lighter note, Ship of Fools, which is a satire online magazine, published 2 lists asking for readers to submit their votes. Heading the list of least embarrassing Christians, Archbishop Desmond Tutu and Jimmy Carter. Topping the list of spiritual leaders least likely to look like Jesus, Fred Phelps, the leader of the Westboro Baptist Church, who devotes his life to attacking feminists and gays, living or dead. Today is All Saints' Day, and All Saints' Day is that universal Christian celebration that honors and remembers all of our Christian saints. This is our Memorial Day. We don't all agree on what constitutes a saint, any more than we agree on such fundamental issues as how to baptize or how often we should celebrate communion. But almost every major denomination celebrates this day because we all understand how much we need this day. It's sort of like the 5-year-old girl who was talking to her grandfather one Saturday afternoon. Grandfather said, "Amy, I wish you could spend the night tonight because you could go to church with me tomorrow." And Amy said, "Well, why are you going to church tomorrow, Grandpa?" "Because it's All Saints Sunday, Amy." "But Grandpa, we're not saints, we're Presbyterians." Well, Presbyterians may not be saints, but they celebrate this special day. Actually, Amy's attitude was a bit refreshing because most groups think they're the only saints, don't they? Someone's discovered minutes from a meeting in the town of Milford, Connecticut in 1640, and it read this. What did they do at their meeting of the Puritans in 1640? They voted that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Well, I'm glad they agree with the scriptures. They voted that the earth is given to the saints. I'm glad they agree with the scriptures. The third thing they voted on, we are the saints. Okay. Christians may not agree on what constitutes a saint, and I doubt we could get a list together of the top 10 saints, perhaps, and all agree. But what is it that makes a saint? Is it personal virtue or discipline? Is it concern for the poor and the outcast? Is a saint pious? Is a saint austere? Is a saint merry and outgoing? We have example of both sides throughout history if we look. St. Peter of Alcantara was a Franciscan monk of the early 16th century and no doubt one of your personal favorites as well. For almost 40 years, St. Peter of Alcantara slept no more than an hour and a half every single night. To keep himself awake, he sat upright with his head resting against a piece of wood driven into the wall. He wore a habit and cape of the coarsest material made, and he never, ever covered his head. He lived in extreme poverty. In the winter, he would often take off his cape and keep the doors and windows wide open to suffer in the cold. He always went barefoot. He fasted 2 out of every 3 days. He was said to be an excellent preacher, but he preferred solitude. In fact, he once confessed after living for years as a member of a cloister, he did not know another single friar by sight. Is that what is desirable to be a saint? To cut yourself off from everyone else? To choose a life of suffering and deprivation? Some have thought so. How can you love your neighbor, though, if you don't know who your neighbor is? Is it necessary to give up everything the world has to offer so that you can experience God? I have some thoughts on what might make a saint, and they're consistent, I think, with our gospel reading today. First of all, a saint's life is not dominated by things. Jesus said it best, of course. You can't worship both God and money. In today's reading, we read, "Blessed are the poor." We might argue what Jesus meant by that, but it's really crystal clear that the teachings of Jesus consider material possessions or the love of material possessions as a potential detriment to our discipleship. James Patterson and Peter Kim wrote a book sometime back that had lists in it. It was called "The Day America Told the Truth." Researchers asked Americans, what are you willing to do for $10 million? Scary answers. 25% of all those polled would abandon their families. 25% of them would abandon their church. 23% would become prostitutes for 1 week. 16% would give up their American citizenship. 16% would leave their spouses. 10% will withhold a testimony and let a murderer go free. 7% would murder a stranger. And 3% would give their own children up for adoption for $10 million. You see, there's a really fierce battle going on for America's soul, and it's really not between right or left, black or white. It's between the worship of our possessions and our money and our things and the worship of God. We're in love with our things. And we as a culture have let those things become a healthy substitute, an unhealthy substitute for healthy relationships. Our love of things is stronger than our desire to be like Christ. A saint, first of all, Jesus says, is not dominated by our things. Secondly, a saint is not focused on himself or herself, but focused on God and others. What is the greatest commandment? To love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. It is not inward focusing, it is outward focusing. This is why a saint can be blessed even when they're persecuted. A saint's not obsessed with a position in society or with others' approval. That's kind of the irony of the Christian way. The more we sit around and think about whether we're happy or not, the more miserable we're going to be. The more we center our lives on making other people our focus, on bringing joy to the world around us, ironically, the more fulfilling life can be. Saints don't take a whole lot of time thinking about themselves. Their focus is on God and their neighbors. Saints don't have to go to Calcutta like Teresa or to Africa like Albert Schweitzer. But neither are they part of the me generation. They take life seriously, not themselves. They know that life is too short to sit around and worry about the little things. A saint is an important part of his or her church, his or her community. And this brings me to the third part of why I think a saint is a saint. A saint leaves the world a better place than they found it. Christian writer and theologian Friedrich Buechner says this: in his holy flirtation with the world, God occasionally drops a handkerchief, and these handkerchiefs are called saints. Let me give you a little history there. That's an antiquated saying and image. But in the old days, when a lady wasn't allowed to flirt with a man, she might just drop her handkerchief, and an attentive man would pick it up, and now they met, and they could begin a conversation. In his holy flirtation with the world, I love that image, God occasionally just drops a handkerchief to get our attention. And those handkerchiefs, Buchner says, are the lives of the saints. Who are those holy remembrances of God's love in your life? We need this day. I need this day. I need to remember that those who I loved are not that far away. I need to be reminded that no matter what storms life will bring, 2020, God is still God. And I also need to be challenged today to lead a life that is not solely about me and mine. That I too am called to be one of the saints through my life, through my gifts, through my example. That I am called, as are you, to leave this world a better place than we found it. Happy All Saints' Day. Now you know why I love it.